Amani channel, this is webvideochefs.com, and in this recipe I'm going to share some tips if you're just getting started about how you can make your videos look 100% better. This is for folks who are just starting in video. But before I do that, I wanted to share my story, because I know that I've created hundreds of videos online. Maybe you've seen my urban report, maybe you've seen my tutorials on Web Video Chefs. And I've never really just sat down and sort of spilled my guts on camera. I know I've sort of woven my story. If you go through my archive of videos, you can learn a lot about my background. But I haven't really just, had a heartfelt conversation with you. One-way conversation with you, that is. So for those of you who may not know or do know, I'm from East Palo Alto, California, which is in the heart of the Silicon Valley and the San Francisco Bay Area. But don't get it twisted. East Palo Alto is very much like any other inner city community in the United States, especially in the 90s when I was growing up, the late 80s, early 90s. Like any other inner city neighborhood where you had a lot of crime, a lot of crack cocaine sales, a lot of young folks making a lot of bad decisions. And growing up, I always watched the news. My dad was always watching like KTVU Channel 2, watching Dennis Richmond and Elaine Corral. For any of those who are old school from the Bay, you know about them. Always listening to NPR. And, as I was growing up, noticed that the only time the news would cover the community was, of course, when some sort of crime or violence, some sort of murder or homicide happened in the city. And in 1992, East Palo Alto was actually the murder capital of the country. And so the city is 2.5 square miles, but per capita, per the percentage of residents, the crime rate was higher, the murder rate was higher than any other community in the nation. That just sort of speaks to the severity of what was going on back then. I think things have kind of calmed down, but even still, things happen. Things happen in the hood, right? And so, growing up, it was kind of a contradiction, because my parents were both college educated. I knew there were positive things happening in the community, but the news never really came out when anything positive was happening, which is no different than happens today. And so after graduating from high school, I went to community college. I thought I was going to study business. Then my second year, I took an announcing class, and really have never stopped working in the media since then. And so I ended up having an on-air shift at KCSM Jazz 91, ended up associate producing a program that aired on the college TV station, which was a PBS station. And so I had some practical experience even before I transferred to the University of Florida, which was a big leap of faith also, because I left the confines of California to move all the way across the country to the University of Florida, where I continue to study broadcasting and study news. And upon graduation, I moved back to California, and my dad was like, "What are you doing back here? What are you going to do now?" And I was like, "I don't know." Well, it just so turns out that I had applied to a news management internship through a media organization. And out of the blue, my phone rang when I was back home, and they were like, "Hey, you got a job in DC. Got to hit the road, Jack." And so things worked out. I moved to DC and worked through the internship program. It was a paid internship too, which is really rare in news or in media. Like most PR, news, TV internships don't pay squat. So that was a blessing. And so through the internship program, I worked with basically every department in the station, and ended up being mentored by a reporter named Sam Ford, who really took me under his wing. I started doing stand-ups, and he really encouraged me to write stories. And so I started writing stories, though, it sucked at the time. I was really fresh and new, and I had no on-air experience. But that was really where I gravitated, was towards the field. And then started working on the assignment desk after the news management internship was over. And so was trying to find a reporter job, and was sending out tapes. Anyone who's ever worked in the news knows that finding that first job, whether it's on air or otherwise, can be challenging. Sent out about 70 tapes, maybe 70, 80 tapes, and had lunch with a fellow Gator who was in DC, and she was like, "I heard the station in Tampa has a reporter trainee position. You might want to check it out." Just really random conversation, random lunch meeting. And so I called the station, and they said, "You're really not supposed to call TV stations anyways." And I called, and they said, "Send your tape, because we're about to close the position." So I sent the tape, and they ended up hiring me. Excuse me. So that was really my start in my path towards being on air. And so I worked about a year behind the scenes, learning how to shoot, edit, writing anchor packages. And then finally, Fox 13 management, Phil Metlin, got to give a shout out to him, because he saw something in me to where he finally let me start reporting in Tampa, which is a huge market. Tampa's like the the 12th or 13th largest market in the country. So most times, most on-air talent starts in a smaller market and you work your way up as you improve over the years. Well, you know, this is my first on-air job working in Tampa, Florida, huge market. I was really green. I didn't even have any respect for what reporters did. I had no idea what I was really supposed to do. And it was rough at first. You know, I made my fair share of mistakes, blunders. I feel like I was probably the laughing stock of the newsroom in some respects, especially when I was, you know, the first several years of me reporting. Just didn't have my on-air swag, babbled through a lot of my live shots. It was really tough. I got written up at least once. And finally, a fellow photographer, a cameraman who, you know, we were working on something and I was over at his spot and he was like, you know, a lot of the photographers talk bad about you. And I was like, dude, man, I'm struggling. Like, it's not a surprise. It wasn't even a surprise to me. And so, you know, we really became close friends and he really took me under his wing and helped me along in my path. And I really owe a lot to Rod Finch. Shout out to Rod Finch, who lives in Atlanta now. He's here in Atlanta. But that's really what got my on-air swag. And I kind of finally figured it out after a few years. And really left Tampa, you know, by the time I left Tampa in 2006, I was a respected broadcaster. But I'm sure I had that reporter trainee stigma that probably never left me, which is one of the reasons why I left. So I moved to Atlanta in 2006 and to work for a small cable network called Black Family Channel. And I was charged with developing a citizen journalism show because, you know, at that time, citizen journalism was still kind of chic. The network was catered their content towards African Americans, obviously, Black Family Channel. And so they wanted to develop a show that was based on everyday citizens who were creating and developing content and sharing those stories through the show. And that's really how I got introduced to social media, was through my research. And I started my blog because, you know, at that time, blogs really the backbone of citizen journalism. And since I had the video skills through my professional experience, I started doing my own community stories. So I grabbed my camera and probably I still had was still wound up kind of tight after working all those years in the news business. So I started doing my own stories, interviewing people and posting the interviews on a YouTube channel that I created. And that's really was my really introduction to social media and to vlogging and all of that. So fast forward now. All right, now we're in 2012, almost 2013 actually. And so now I'm really giving back through Web Video Chefs. I teach at West Georgia, have some opportunities at some other universities as well. I got my master's in 2010. And so this is really my way of not only giving back, but I feel like video is so powerful of a medium, not only for sales and for lead generation and for making millions and gajillions of dollars, but just for sharing our stories, because there are a couple of stories that really stand out that I've been able to share. One is the birth of my twin boys. My wife and I had twins that were born in 2006. Unfortunately, they were born 20 weeks, which, you know, full term is 40 weeks. So they were really too young to survive. They really didn't have a chance. They lived about an hour, and it was devastating. I mean, I don't wish that any family would ever experience a premature birth to that extent that we did. And so out of that, though, I was videotaping the whole process, and I created a documentary about our experience, and I posted it to YouTube, of course. And so every year we use that video, and it was actually really therapeutic to create that video, both for myself and for my wife. And so every year we do a fundraiser for the March of Dimes. That video has been integral. We're one of the top fundraising families, teams in Atlanta. And we'll continue to fundraise for the March of Dimes in memory of Rico and Jordan. And the second story is one where I was back home in California, and I took my video camera and I recorded my brother kind of driving through the streets of East Palo Alto. Really organic conversation, just sharing his thoughts. And it was really gave a different look, you know, a different perspective than you may see if you just watch the news. Because as powerful as the news is, it sometimes can give a skewed perspective on life. And you have to kind of look beyond what you see on TV and look to others to share their authentic experiences, which is what we can get if we share our stories through social media. So with that, you know, share a story, pick up a camera, tell a story. Stories are very important. And so I'm going to share some tips to help you tell your stories right now. Thanks for making it this far. So if you're just starting, you know, you can use your cell phone, you can use a camcorder. It really doesn't matter what you use, but there's some basic principles when it comes to your camera work that you should always adhere to and keep in mind. First of all, it's always best to use a tripod. If you're using a smartphone, there are certain tripod mounts that you can get for your phone. But use a tripod. There are three basic shots you should always think about getting as you're capturing your B-roll. A wide shot or a long shot, which is an establishing shot, a medium shot, which is a more intimate shot. This is kind of a medium shot, and then a close-up, which if we were zooming in, a close-up would be like just of my head, it'd be like a headshot or something like that. So those are the three basic shots. And if you look at storytelling, if you get those three basic shots, you'll be covered throughout your storytelling. Now, when it comes to shooting your footage, what you do is you hopefully you're using a tripod, but if not, what you want to do is hold your camera as still as possible when you're shooting your B-roll, when you're shooting your footage. A lot of people like to follow movement around. I say wave it like a flashlight. Want to hold your camera still. You want to let your camera do the work. So once you frame your shot up, know what you're looking at, just hold the camera and let the camera capture the footage for 10, 15 seconds at a minimum. And then you take a medium shot and do the same thing, capture 10 to 15 seconds of the medium shot, then 10 to 15 seconds of your close-up. All right, and then you'll be in good shape. Now, the last thing I'm gonna lead you with is learn about the rule of thirds, because the rule of thirds is really gonna step up your shot composition. So you have to know what you're focusing on. You have to know what the focal point of your shot is. And by using the rule of thirds, it will not only help you do that, but it'll also give you a well-framed shot. And so the rule of thirds, basically you divide the screen up, or your screen up, into a tic-tac-toe board, and you frame your shot into a third of that frame. So you know, you can frame it up like I'm kind of in a third of the frame, and this monitor is in a third of the frame. But there's upper thirds, you know, there's lower thirds, and there's the periphery. And so if you just start watching watch the news, watch how they frame up their shots, start, you know, learning about Google the rule of thirds. I created a tutorial about the rule of thirds, which I'll link to in this video. But start applying the rule of thirds, and your videos are gonna look a lot better. So with that, I'm going to say thank you so much. You know I'm here to help. It's ask@webvideochefs.com. Feel free to like this video, share it, comment, and I'll talk to you soon. You know how we do it here.